you welcome patients to go on, please?
Wake wash, dress, bus, tube, work, home, bed. Wake wash, dress, bus, tube, work, home, bed. Rolling in money. I'm rolling over in bed. I don't want to get ahead in marketing or advertising. All the people spend the night in queues to climb the ladder to abuse. You're giving me an offer I can't refuse, but a company won't comfort me when all I see are spots before my eyes on ties. The noose around the neck for the sake of a paycheck. Money talks, but it lies. Money talks, you hear it on the stock exchange. When the pound goes crush and there's no remains. And the company's complaining that they haven't made a profit, so they dock your pay or sack you, then they talk to you. Come off it. Money talks, you hear it on the underground. In the middle of the tunnel when the tube breaks down. It is so much inhibited, it really is pathetic. An entire generation under general anaesthetic. Wake wash, dress bus, tube work, home bed, wake wash, dress bus.
I'm living in an overcrowded house, in an overcrowded city. In an overcrowded country, in an overcrowded world.
Doctors are my problem because the only way they can deal with my voices and get rid of them is to drug me up to such an extent that I can't function normally. And that means that I have no quality of life.
So they were sort of experimenting with me. They swap and change my medication, and I think it was giving me side effects. And it used to make me, when I'm walking, I didn't know which foot to lift.
We have in our own community, we have all the skills necessary to run businesses, to run sanctuaries, to run sheltered housing, to run all those things. And it proves to me that users, people who society on the whole ostracise and stigmatise, actually have proven that a dream can turn into reality.
We don't want to create a day centre environment, we don't want to create a drop-in centre environment, we want to be totally new.
And the most important about our project is that it's a community sanctuary. It doesn't give you about being a loon or a survivor. Everyone's surviving. And in this community here, in these streets here, in the heart of the front line of Brixton here, everyone survives. And so therefore it's a community sanctuary, a safe place for everyone. And hopefully they won't become so distressed they have to be locked up in a bin or get in prison.
We want to get away from the sort of medical model type role, though I'm not in any way saying that the medical model role doesn't suit some people. That's fine. We don't want to feel people to come here and feel that they have to follow our path. It's down to them. They tell me what they want, and hopefully I'll be able to provide it.
I mean, everyone has a crisis in their lives, and it's a good place to come and have a sit down and have a cup of tea, have something to eat, without having to justify yourself. Without having to say, well, the reason I'm coming is because I'm ill, or because I'm here because I'm here.
Particularly the problem with mental health is that almost as soon as you sit down in front of a psychiatrist, you're then labelled a mental patient. By definition, you don't know about yourself anymore. You aren't the expert on yourself. Somebody else becomes the expert on you, and that can't really be so. You know, also as mental patients, we're not credible witnesses. That's what's wrong. That's what's wrong. Immediately, our power to speak for ourselves, is taken away just as soon as we become labelled.
At the time when it happened, I said to myself, why and how am I going to get out of the situation in which I fell into? Being administered drugs is terrifying if you don't agree. If you don't agree to it, it's horrible. You'll never get over it until you actually confront it.
The first time I went to a hospital was on the basis that it would be good for me to do some occupational therapy during the day, and to mix with people, and I had the impression I could kind of casually drop into this setup. And I went up there, and within 5 minutes I was undressed and dressed in a kind of NHS sort of light grey robe, being asked about my medical history by nurses. And I thought, how has this happened?
That afternoon, when it was medication time, they gave me a glass full of this dark medication. And I says, what is it? And they said, just drink it and then we'll tell you. And when I drank it, they said to me, it's liquid Ligato. And that first week I put on 10 pounds. The second week I put on 9 pounds. And the third week I put on another 9 pounds. And I went from 10 to 23 stone.
When they give you the medication, right, it turns into something else, because what you come in with about 3 weeks time, you're about something totally different, because they've totally drugged you up. And when you look at you in 3 weeks time, it's not the problem you come in with that's going to be facing. I'm facing something totally different.
When I was first doing exams, I started hearing and seeing things that weren't apparent to those around me, and when I mentioned this, I got taken to see a psychiatrist, and he said, well, have a couple of Valiums and it will probably go away. And it didn't. It affected my balance a bit, and it just made me shut up about my experiences, because I didn't really want to be treated in that way.
Aromatherapy, it's, well, what I do is I use the essential oils of plants mixed with base oils like almond oil in massage, and then you get the benefit of the massage, and you also get the benefit of the oils, which are very good for relaxation and relieving depression and all kinds of ailments. Psychiatric treatment is very distancing. The doctor's one side of the table and patient's the other side. With this, you've got the sort of human contact. And, it's just a lovely thing to be able to do. I think everyone should be able to do it, just so that you can. It's a very friendly way of communicating, as well as a form of healing. If you actually give people the right kind of treatment, and then they don't keep on coming back year after year. If you give somebody like drugs or ECT, then you're actually setting up more problems for them in the future and ensuring that they become like a revolving door patient. Psychiatry is so much in the pay of the drug companies. I mean, you can't make profit out of plant oils. You can't patent them, and you can't sort of corner the market quite the way that they do, like the big drug companies do. Oh, it's one of my dreams to have a, whatever you'd call it, maybe not a mental health centre, but a place that people could go to if they were in distress, whatever kind of distress, where there would be treatments like aromatherapy and massage, acupuncture, yoga, tai chi, that kind of thing. Treatments that wouldn't be invasive to the body and wouldn't be damaging. It's not what the health service is putting its money into. It's putting its money into drugs still. I think these treatments should be offered to people on the National Health Service.
What advocacy and empowerment mean to me are people who use the mental health services or are mental health patients actually getting to have a say in how they're treated in the system, and that their knowledge of themselves and what they need is actually taken into account. And to me that means a far better system, and one that's fundamentally different from the one that we've had over the years.
There's nothing mysterious about advocacy, really. It's about people getting their rights, people being heard.
You get listened to, in a way, but I think most patients sort of experience this sort of listening to isn't, you're not being responded to. You're listening, somebody's taking notes on you, which is very different to being actually genuinely listened to. Assessment very often feels like the denial of any personal validity. Psychiatry assumes one group of people to have the ability and right to judge the experiences, appearances, and behavior of others as being symptoms of ill minds.
I don't think they treat black people the same as how they treat white people. There's a rule for white people and there's a rule for black people. We have two different cultures. We have different culture than the white people. And because we talk loud and we laugh out loud, our behavior is more loud than white people. They think it's mental illness.
The psychiatric profession is geared to a white Eurocentric model of mental health. And the difficulty is this often doesn't apply to black people when it comes to diagnosis and treatment, but also recognising the experiences of black people in the general context of living in this racist society. And I think that's not taken enough account of by psychiatry in this country. I think one of the difficulties for black people in mental health services is, first of all, there's the issue of trying to get a decent service for themselves or their relatives. And then there's the aspect of trying to actually have an influence on the services. They're two very different things, and I think they're not always taken enough into account. But it is essential that black people do have a say in the planning of mental health services and community care proposals, because otherwise exactly the same thing will be repeated, that services won't be geared to the needs of black people.
Because of my upbringing, perhaps because of being male, and because I've got a white skin, people perhaps found it easier to see me as someone who might be sane again one day. And I knew when I left the mental health system that there were loads of people who were stuck in it who could also have been leaving it if they'd had the opportunities I've had.
Suddenly meeting a lot of people who also believed that there was something fundamentally wrong with the system, and it wasn't just them who were ill, but it was actually they were victims of a dreadful system, really set me thinking. And I started to believe that my experiences were valid, that they had some kind of value. And in fact, most of my problems had been either as a result of medication or as a result of being told that I was ill or not worthy or not quite right.
Users of services need the dignity, rights and fulfillment of every other member of society. And our problems are not separate from, but merely an extension and further amplification of theirs. The way we are treated is a litmus test for the health of the whole society. Empowerment is at the heart of this process, for it means total acceptance of the person's individuality. And that acceptance is also the true way towards healing. And I'd like to close by just drawing people's attention, if they're not aware of it, to the roots of the term psychiatry. In Greek, the root of psychiatrist means healer of souls. Thank you.
What I'd really like to achieve is a much higher level of user power than there is already. I mean, there seems to be very little in Tower Hamlets generally in terms of no user forums to speak of, no patients' council here, nothing much at all really. And I'd like to do something to kind of reverse that. to empower people. We'd like people to self-refer to the project. It's very important the project's seen as outside of the hospital management structure, and professionals have to not really refer people to us, because otherwise we're likely to get confused, you know, like, oh, another social worker or another something else, and not be seen as what we in fact are, which is like an independent group, if you like. We are actually doing a lot of work meeting with staff on the wards and so on, and meeting with different projects in the community to tell them about what we're doing. And I think there's some apprehension about how we're actually going to work. I mean, lots of mental health professionals have an advocacy role, social workers, doctors and so on. And there's a lot of them asking, you know, how do we differ from them? And I think how we differ from them is that we take on things that perhaps patients can't take to other professionals, especially like if they're under sections of the Mental Health Act. Like, I think a big thing in hospital is the ward round, where a lot of decisions are made, and often the patient feels very powerless in that situation because they're taken into a room full of maybe 15 or 20 professionals, maybe less, but up to that number, and they're expected to kind of answer questions put to them by the psychiatrist. And, you know, maybe as a result of that, big questions are answered by the professionals about how they should be treated.
Sometimes there's a meeting here, the older meeting here, but they don't really listen. It just goes through one area and goes through the next with them. You know, they don't really listen to what you have to say. It's just their way all the time.
I do listen to my patients. That's my job. I talk to them, I listen to them, I find out what it is that they want, what sort of treatment they think they want, how best we can help. I listen to their relatives. It may be, because at the end of the day, I have to make my decisions on treatment on my own professional experience and judgment. It may be that they feel I've got it wrong, and they should have an opportunity to challenge that. And if they're not terribly articulate, and quite a few of them aren't, then I think perhaps they need somebody else who's more articulate, who's better versed in their rights, who can perhaps come along and put that to me, or to my employers, or to the appropriate legal agencies. I think it's very important that those people who are seen as advocates, either the pressure group type advocates or the individual advocates on behalf of users of mental health services, are truly representative and not just representing their own strongly held beliefs.
You get all sorts of rubbish from professionals about when you stand up on a platform and talk about things. You get the inevitable, who do you represent? You're far more articulate than the users we have of our services. All this kind of rubbish.
What would you say to them?
Well, how representative are they? Who do they represent? How typical are they of the general public? I'm not here to represent anyone. I'm here to try and right a few wrongs, to actually improve things for a lot of people who have been nothing less than victims of a basically corrupt power system.
We all need to feel that we're doing something worthwhile and that we're doing a good job. So listening to users has got to be affected in a way where it becomes a partnership and it isn't competitive or overly aggressive. And unless that we can facilitate it in that way, professionals won't listen. And they will go away and say that people either behave badly or didn't understand or haven't a broader view or haven't got the operational pressures that they have, and therefore they don't understand really. And of course the age-old argument that I hear day in, day out virtually is users aren't representative. Well, neither am I. But I've got an awful lot of power, and yet what right have I got to say what people should have?
There was a series of meetings planned to develop a new hospital unit, and the managers were very, very keen to involve users in the meetings, the planning meetings. And I thought, oh yes, that seems like a good place to start. And I had started attending the meetings and trying to get users to go along with me. but the users were bored rigid by these meetings, these committee meetings, and they couldn't really see how on earth they could have any say, because all the decisions had actually been made. I think the managers didn't really have a very clear picture about what we were in business to do. They thought we were representatives of people who use the service, and we would act in that fashion, that the managers could deal with us, and they didn't have to worry about dealing with users. I think that's what they thought, that we would be compliant, tame users who would do a reasonable, polite job without ruffling too many feathers and without causing too many waves, allowing an appearance of participation or a token of participation to appear to be genuine participation. And of course it wasn't genuine participation at all. And when I realised that I was almost becoming sucked into the management, I was being almost seen as part of the management by the users. And when I realised that, I dropped out immediately, realised my mistake.
I said this last at a committee I'm on. I said this at the last one, that if they didn't involve more users, as I was the only user, apart from a load of professionals from all different agencies, if they didn't actually start involving the users from around the city, that I would have to withdraw. I haven't been to one, I've just had a phone call now telling me there's one tomorrow morning, and I can't go because I know there's not going to be another user in that room. And it's just so intimidating. And when I mentioned it, one of the workers turned around and said, why can't you find it too, what was the word you used?
Incomprehensible.
Incomprehensible, because of the jargon that they use. We don't use all their jargon.
One of the professionals actually used the word
demographic.
Demographic. And we said, whoa, just a minute, what does that mean? And it took 5 professionals to explain it. So even they don't know what they're talking about. They're just ignorant to the fact that people that use the services, or the majority of people that use the services, have not sat through their committee meetings and learnt their language. And it's like lawyers and all that. They sit down and they have their own language, and it gives them the power.
The whole tokenist aspect of users on committees is appalling. It used to be a token user in much the same way one had token women and then token blacks, in which someone is just completely marginalised and then patronisingly asked at the end of the meeting, well, what do users think about this?
I mean, my main feeling is working in North Manchester, where people come from a kind of working class socio-economic background. I mean, user involvement has to be geared towards that kind of people. I mean, you can't get people who have never been on planning committees, for instance, to kind of be on high-geared planning committees and be able to make their point. I mean, especially if there are about 10 providers or 10 professionals there and 2 users who've got no kind of training in that kind of stuff to kind of get out and say whatever they want. I mean, I think if the health authority really wants user involvement or user empowerment, they have to design a system where they can get from people what they want.
Well, bottom line on this is 164 sitting on people.
The right key. This is the sort of thing we find, isn't it? Yes. I've given you the wrong key, I think. One of the key things about the way SPAN operates is that we run a number of different workshops, and each workshop is like an autonomous, self-running group. Because many people who have been through the psychiatric system are poor, it seemed important to address the question of money making and the handling and management of money. And it seemed important to us to hand over the responsibility for both the making of money and also the spending and dispersal of money to the people who had actually generated that money in the first place. One of the things that has seemed very significant here has been the need to not simply start, say, involving users in the interview panels of the recruitment and selection process, but to ensure that we have a policy which enshrines that in a way that fully satisfies the training requirements, the confidentiality issues, the equal opportunities legislation, and satisfies us that we are doing this job in the best way we possibly can. There's also a learning process where this year I take a couple more risks than I did last year because I've got experience and also because the people I'm working with have learned as well. We have to learn different ways of meeting and decision making and information sharing. It's not enough to call a meeting. You sometimes have to have a kind of town crier function where somebody goes through and speaks one-to-one and announces in a number of different settings what's going on and does that kind of creative information sharing and decision making. Posters are no good if people can't read. There's also the questions about the limits of decision making. When I go to the supermarket, I want to simply get my food and go home. I don't want to be on the customer complaints or customer advice panel regularly meeting to give a view about whether the aisles are too close together. I simply want to get my food and go. And there are a number of people who want to participate in the basic service delivery of what we offer here, but don't want to be that heavily involved. Institutionalisation as a process tends to silence people, prevent people from making decisions, from negotiating with other people, from participating and taking responsibility. And very often, where people are involved in things and invited to give comment and speak, it's very hard then for people to believe that their say makes a difference.
Yeah, the way the food is here is a sore point with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And do you feel that you know things have been changed since you spoke about it?
Things have changed for the better since I spoke about it.
Have they?
Yes. But they're not to the standard that I should like to see them yet.
Still not cordon bleu?
No, I don't want cordon bleu, no. I just want a decent wholesome meal.
Right.
You know. Which you can get in the staff canteen.
Professionals traditionally are quite protective and defensive about what they deliver because they often genuinely believe that they're acting in people's best interests. And when they hear that they're not, that can be a very painful experience.
You have to understand you provide human services and you've got a nice car and you've got a nice house and you've got a wonderful social life and you've got nice money in the bank. The reason why you've got the nice money in the bank is because there's some poor souls sitting in a psychiatric hospital or sitting in the community with nothing. And while they're sitting there with nothing, you've got a good wage coming in. And as soon as they've got something or as soon as people are empowered, perhaps you're not going to be needed as much, you're not going to be paid as much. Now, a lot of human service providers don't like to consider the fact that they trade in misery, but the harsh reality of it is we do. Nobody suffers when we're needed. We have to go and look for another job. It's quite healthy that we do have the two perspectives because, as John said, it's an alliance, it's a partnership. If things are going to change, then we have to work together as people to make them change.
At the moment there are still people pulling in different directions, and I think part of that is the threat of advocacy. And the threat of advocacy is something people actually won't admit to. And it comes if you start empowering patients, users, recipients, clients, then somebody's going to have to lose power or start sharing power. And that is a major threat to it. It starts challenging services, it starts challenging practices of services, it starts people saying, I want my say in this service, I have a valuable contribution to make here too, and I need to be listened to. It gives people, it should give people the opportunity to say, well, okay, how can we make our service better?
And people will come pretending to be allies, even pretending to themselves, but will be busy trying to control. And that's difficult. And people will have at different stages to have choices to make as to whether they are silent or whether they come out and speak on behalf of users. Sometimes professionals have to be silent, but sometimes they can actually take a radical step. But they need the support for that. So we have to work. I feel that we need these alliance groups. We need actually to get together.
think really because I'd had such a, damaged time myself, or such a bad time myself, I didn't feel that I could be a good mother. I don't know, it's fun. I mean, it's very hard work, it's very demanding, but it's also very creative and sort of challenging. I think this is where empowerment starts, or disempowerment, I think because Fungai's now 16 months and at an age where she's very much got her own agenda of what she wants to do. She'll take me by the hand and take me somewhere, or want to do something and not want to do something else. And I think how you respond to that is it, affects whether the child becomes empowered. I think empowerment is a lot about expressing yourself, and what happens too often is people, because certain aspects of their expression when they're in severe states of distress is seen as abnormal and wrong and bad, and so they are medicated and put in hospital and locked away from people, that it then becomes quite hard, and the drugs suppress people's expression of their feelings and so on, and it then becomes very hard for people to be very spontaneous. And children are enormously spontaneous,
This is the Blackfoot. This is the Blackfoot. Black foot, white foot, right foot, left foot, my foot, your foot, barefoot. Same foot, human foot.
It's such a wide area of advocacy. I think simply put, we see advocacy as helping people to get what they need in the most appropriate way, as far as we can, simple as that really. It also includes people's practical problems and issues around education, training, financial problems, all those sort of things. At the same time, it's also those people who want to get involved in planning processes or in other mental health forums, that we act to sort of, support them to get into those forums in a way that they feel comfortable to make a contribution. But first and foremost, it's individual needs that we look at.
The situation inside the community, where a hospital is superficial, you go out to a hospital for treatment. I mean, people have to live, that's the treatment. And having a shop in the area where people are living and they can relate to, they can see what's going off and stuff like that, setting up for places like this, it would be no need for hospitals, really, if you come to places like this, because you can immediately empathise with people.
The Environment Award was won because we renovated 2 houses that were originally derelict in an environmentally friendly way.
The houses were just neglected, and Wickham Mine saw potential. The majority of it was done by users and members of Wickham Mine. They said, yeah, if you can do it, and we did it. This is a load of rubble when we first came here, and this has all been slowly developed since end of last year. There's been various changes of plan, but basically we've got it together, and as you see it now, I think it's how it's going to be. So there might be a chicken run down there eventually with a few chickens in. Battery chickens that have had a rough time, they might have a better time.
I feel that professionals start feeling insecure when users start showing they can do things independently. My God, they'll be running the day centre next and we'll be redundant, type of thing. But I think the area of daycare is particularly an area that I continually saying, well, there's a drop in, users can run it themselves. Don't close it because the staff are on holiday. Cuddle Cottage has come about because of our open door policy at our centre. We've become aware that people in crisis haven't got anywhere to go. There's women's aid refuges, but for people in a mental health crisis, hospital seems to be the usual alternative. and we're hoping that we'll be able to help some people not to go into hospital by providing support both at our centre here and overnight stays at Cuddle Cottage. There's 190,000 empty properties in Britain, and if users got together, they could take over some of these properties for centres, crisis centres, drop-ins, and the local authorities will probably support that sort of action. I was in hospital in 1976 after being on Section 136, and I had a tremendous sense of anger about what happened to me. I think that psychiatric hospitals in time will become completely extinct and be replaced by smaller units such as Cuddle Cottage. And they'll have nicer names as well. They won't be called halfway houses, psyche hospitals. They'll be called Cuddle Cottage. We want to embrace people who are suffering, not section them, take their liberties away and start them on the path to institutionalisation.
Well, it's certainly better than what the authorities offer. The alternative when I was in hospital was to be put into a social services hostel. And I felt that that would be taking my liberty from me. Because whenever you go out in one of the authority hostels, you have to ask for permission to go out. So if I was in a position of coming out of hospital, I'd much prefer to go to Mines Cuddle Cottage, where at least you get your freedom and you'd be away from the authorities.
The thing that really keeps me enthused is other people's enthusiasm. This place is so full of energy, it's a wonder it doesn't take off. It's like sometimes being the director of this place, it's a frightening experience. It's like sitting on top of a Saturn V rocket. When you realise you're not in control, you can never hope to be in control, all you can offer is your expertise and guidance. And that is it. That's the whole thing.
I think it's the people that make the place.
Yeah.
We all feel happy with each other. We can support each other and help each other the best we can. And I feel that's the way you can survive the system which has made you have difficulties in the first place. We're a healing place, whereas the system is damaging.
As a director of something, as anybody involved in management has sometimes got to hurry up and do nothing. Literally sit back and watch what happens. Don't let people completely destroy their lives, but to actually allow them to fail, because failure is often the way we learn. If you don't give users directly the money to run their own organisations, then you're disempowering them. The British seem to have this thing about we will give people tokens, we will give people other people who will tell them how to spend it, but we will not give people the money directly. It's almost as if they're afraid that they will come up with something better.
It's been slowly coming along as part of the employment scheme that we've got here, and so users can actually earn a little bit of spare cash or whatever, helping out on the centre itself, making it look better.
It's important to actually value people enough to pay them for their efforts.
Yeah.
It's part of that whole empowerment process that money talks.
Well, it's only a little bit of money, but it's still...
Yeah, it's still something.
Yeah.
Better than now.
Yeah.
Better than we not do it.
I do a bit of cricket umpiring, only at a kind of village and company level, but it's good fun. I always wanted to be a great cricketer, and a couple of years ago I woke up to the fact that I'll never be a great cricketer, but I could be a fair umpire, and I've done a short course in umpiring, and I'm hoping to take umpiring exams. So cricket's been one of the great loves of my life, and this best view on the pitch, I think. I suppose I have two major qualifications in my life. I have a degree in economics and statistics, which was the result of 4 years moderate toil at University College Cardiff, and a hell of a lot of experience that was the result of 12 years toil throughout the psychiatric system. Now, a qualified economist can walk into a job at £50,000. A qualified loony is struggling to make ends meet on inadequate benefits or scraping a living putting yogurt cartons together. And that's a criminal waste of talent. One thing that is very sad is that all the work I do on the Survivors Speak Out newsletter is for nothing. I mean, I don't get paid a thing for that, whereas I get paid very well for some of the stuff I'm doing for the, for example, the NHS Training Directorate for the National Institute of Social Workers. And it doesn't seem to value the work of the newsletter, which is far more important to me and far more important to a lot of people, that's not recognised.
Well, I think in mental hospitals they should treat the patients better because they're human beings and they're there because the patients are there, not the other way around. They owe their jobs to the patients coming into their hospitals, so their job depends on whether they treat these people well or not, so they should at least try to understand their problems and treat them better.
Do you think they'll listen to you?
I hope so.
When I came out of hospital, I was talking to my social worker and I told him everything about it. And he said to me, he said he could take it a bit further, but he said it would be my word against theirs. And he says it's more than them, more of them than me. So he said that's the only reason why I didn't take it any further.
So one thing I'd like to say to mental health workers is those people that you might think are never going to, get better, always going to be dependent on drugs, always dependent on social security, always struggling, in and out of hospital. Don't make those hopeless assumptions about them, because once you start making those assumptions, then they're more likely to become true. The truth is that those people could be having very good lives, at some point in the future.
We've got to talk to each other honestly about feelings. That's the first stage, because that's what it's about. I mean, they're about very, very painful feelings. It's not. I'm not just saying it is more than just feeling a bit sad now and then. To be deeply emotionally distressed is more than just everyday sadness. That's not. It's not. We're not trying to devalue the depth of despair that people can feel, but I feel that is a human experience that can be understood in a human way. It doesn't need a whole lot of psychiatric labelling and diagnosis to be understood. We can cope with that. We can help each other.
So let's just take our common humanity and form a different type of bond together, where we love or respect each other where it's possible, and at least we don't, manipulate and push people down. Or when we do, let's be able to look at it and learn from our mistakes, learn from each other, and develop new approaches. I think there's an incredible amount could be done for people just sitting down together and listening to each other and coming to new ways of doing things. It's all there in people.
My advice is stay cool.